Hello and welcome to this tips and tricks session that we had at PTC Live 2015. My name is Martin Neumüller. I'm product manager for direct modeling in Creo, and I would like to show you how you can realize a 2D to 3D workflow with PTC Creo Direct 3.0. What we are going to do here is we are going to create a 3D model that you see on the right hand side based on a 2D drawing. As we don't have 2D drawing import into sketches functionality yet inside Creo Direct, we're going to use the IHS import as sort of a workaround to bring the 2D drawing geometry into the session. In the next steps, you're then going to see how we separate the 2D geometry for the individual views and position them relative to each other in 3D space. And the approach to do this is to quickly create new parts for each view. Then we project the view-specific drawing geometry into sketches and define coordinate systems for the subsequent placement. I now created 3 parts and I'm going through the described workflow for the top view now. Note in this example that the geometry projection actually included hidden items, hidden lines from the imported drawing, which will be helpful later on. Also, we can very conveniently refine the sketch and add missing geometry that we might need later on, as for example center lines or symmetry lines. But for the rest, just leave the sketch as is without the need to do a tedious cleanup. Next up will be the front view, going through the same workflow. Projection of the view geometry into a sketch, refinement of the sketch where we feel it might help later on. In this case, we are adding center lines representing the axis of the cylinders and a rectangle by snapping onto existing geometry to make it easier for the revolve tool later on to create the geometry that we want. Of course, it is not required to think about this upfront. We could actually also do this in a later step as well. Finally, again, the creation of a reference coordinate system. And sure enough, as this is a view perpendicular to the previous one, the up direction now needs to be the C or Z direction. While we complete this workflow for the last view, let me just reiterate again on the point that I made earlier. We are in a direct modeling environment, and as such there's no need to fix a lot of 2D geometry to define sketching constraints or put a lot of effort into cleanup of the sketches. Creo Direct supports sketch regions that are being automatically calculated and will make it very easy later on to provide the 3D geometry creation tools such as Revolve with the right input. Okay, again, this all now was just in preparation for us to get the view geometry separated into individual sketches to then orient them correctly relative to each other in 3D space, which is the step that we're going to do now. For this, we use the component position tool and tell it to orient the components so that the reference coordinate systems coincide. If we have defined them correctly, you see how the views now sit relative to each other in 3D, providing us already with a good insight how the model should finally look like and how to create it in 3D. It took us a bit to get fully prepared. As I said, this is a workaround still and not yet a fully tuned workflow. But from now on, things will roll. Let's create 3D geometry. As I do the box selection to define the input for my first revolve command, you see how the sketch regions are automatically being calculated and presented for selection. You can see that the creation of center lines that we did up front helps very much now as reference for the revolution axis. Here we have superfluous geometry that we can quickly select with shape recognition and remove. To recognize geometric shapes in Creo Direct, just press Tab while hovering over a surface, and you can toggle through a list of recognized geometric shapes like bosses, cuts, rounds, or chamfers. Now we still need to create the inner opening. In order to do this, I'm selecting these surfaces and use the Move tool with the Create Side Surface option. Let's quickly create rounds to finish up that part of the design. Note that the chain option helps to automatically create the rounds on the entire edge loops here. And as a last step, we also want to create the fastening elements here, for which we need the top and left views as reference. So I'm turning them on now. Creo Direct 3.0 sketches used for 3D geometry creation have to be inside the active part. That's why we use projection again to bring a meaningful subset of the top view geometry into a new sketch. Here I'm doing a quick cleanup and then ensure I have the outer edge projected and included in my sketch to get a closed contour. Selecting the sketch regions with box select from right to left helps to quickly include all of the regions being touched by the box. Deselect the whole and pull up the 3D geometry. In addition, you can see that we can use the measure tool to measure important dimensions. Here 2 millimeters for the round radius that we will need in a second. We can also use snapping to the 2D geometry to get to the correct dimensions for the height in this example. Then we create the round chain with a 2 millimeter radius that we measured, which completes the design of the first fastening element. Now let's remove some clutter on the screen. You can see that you can control the visibility of objects directly through the model tree by interacting with jackboxes there. And again, box selection allows us to easily select the geometry of this element and apply a rotational pattern around the vertical cylinder to get the second fastening element on the other side. And note that during attachment, also the rounds on that other side will be created. This concludes our demonstrations. Thank you very much and have a good day.